Today on my channel I will make a presentation that I would hope you would like. In the past, when it came to discuss the history of the Gallas, all references started with the writings of Abba Bahiri. Often this Abba Bahiri is only known as a monk who wrote about the invasion of Ethiopia by Gallas. The title of his writing was called Zinahula Galla. Well, today you will finally find out who this Abba Bahiri is. You will also find out who killed the famous Emperor Fasiledas of Ethiopia. Enjoy the ride into Ethiopian history. Chapter 26. And in the same days of winter, when the cause strengthened against King Jacob and against all his soldiers of King Sultan Sagad, and when they did not achieve what they were to do, decided to make friends, and send their mother to Hamelmal, that he might reconcile them to him, so she was with those in her Katama. And then and when they had finished the council, and concluded it, they spoke to Ait Hamelmal, that he should go to his son, King Sultan Sagad, and reconcile them to him. And the business of friendship was like this: he will leave the kingdom to King Jacob, and King Jacob will give him the land of Amhara, and of Welika, and of Manza, and of Shewa, with all the gelt of his father. And she was satisfied with this deal, and went to her son, because she was wounded by the arrow of her love, and was crucified on the tree of tenderness. And his going was in the month of winter, when the waters were scattered and plentiful over all the surface of the earth, and the rain was much, and the mud excessive, and none of this was manifested to him, but it was protecting it the help of God, glorious and exalted, and by for this cause she was saved out of the hand of the strong in heart, and of the stiff-necked, of the Kirban. And having come to her son, she announced to him just like King Jacob with yours told you to say. And having heard all your speech, the king with his own returned to him the business reply, saying, But I cannot leave the kingdom, which I received from God, glorious and exalted, and not from men. Chance it will not be shame on anyone who hears it, if I leave the royal helmet at the command of men without battle or combat, and if I leave the dignity of office, which I received from our Lord, with no one to terrify me or make me afraid. And on these things all the king's soldiers agreed, and they spake with one heart and one mouth, like a man, preparing to die. And having heard these things, the mother of the king was silent, and quieted down, and wintered with her son, saying, God will do what he wants. And when the end of winter approached, on the feast day of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, an amba, which was called Quaraquar, sprouted and killed many people, and took all his goods, which were found in the same amba, because they had rebelled against him, and to his kingdom they preferred the kingdom of King Jacob. And then they brought to them a man, who was cursing the king in the likeness of Seme, and the king went to pierce him, unsheathing the shotel, and before he made the shotel touch his body, the soul left the body of the same man, who became a corpse. And the king, seeing that he had died of fright in the likeness of Nabal, left him without piercing him, but one of the king's Hara cut the dead man's neck. On the fourth day, after these things had taken place, he broke another wall and took all the goods that were in it. In these days of summer King Sultan Sagad went to Manza, and came to the underside of an amba, whose name was Daer, and encamped there to bring down her people, because they were rebels against him, and preferred the king to him. Jacob. And when they were there, Pharis died for the things he had done to himself, and was killed with the instrument of death, which he prepared for himself. But the cause of Pharis's death was, because Pharis himself said, I will enter the king Jacob, and if not, going to my region, I'll shake it up. And that's why he was killed. And after this the king arose from Ali, and went to Hanazo, and came near the villages, which were called Wephima and Dud, which were villages of Pharis, and when he went to them with his own, his way was the way to the hill, and there overcame a dense fog with phase, so that they could not see each other. And after this he encamped at Vaphima, and remained there some days. And when he was there, so many Galla entered him, that they had no number, who were of the tribe of the Karayu, that is, the Belai and the Yele, and he received them with his own, having donned the weapons of war because of suspicion, because the valiant man suspects at all times, and is like a bear giving birth, and like a roaring lion when it seeks food, so also this King Sultan Sagad suspected on all occasions, and was not deceived, until God, glorious and exalted, did what he wanted. And after this he rose from Wephima, and went to Dud, and encamped there, and when I was there, the Galla of the tribe of the Wellos also joined him. And after this he rose from there, and returned to Daer, which he had left before, and circled round the lower part of it, as before about 5 months. And when he was there, before they opened the amba, came to him the Abedahun Welda Crestos, son of the keeper Tatus, from the region of Gujarat, who Teger's dagger, along the path of the Galla, with much anguish and severe trial, when passing from one Galla to another Galla, and all the people of his house the Galla of the tribe of the Marawa destroyed, but God made the hearts of men good. Gala only stopped with him, and gave him favor before them, until he reached King Sultan Sagad, and King Sultan Sagad received him with serene countenance and glad heart, and with him he caused him to dwell in honor. And before, when he died, King Za-Dangal, God saved him from the hand of the Kirban, after that they bound him in a strong prison, and that they led him to a village of seamen, without guilt or reason. And after that, on the third day, after the Abedahun Welda Crestos arrived, the king opened the same amba, whose name was Dayer, and after the amba was opened, the king ordered the Abedahun Welda Crestos to climb to its upper part, and touch the Nagarat. And he went up, and touched, until that the sound of the Nagarat was heard in all the villages around the amba, and there was great rejoicing in the king's camp. And after this he arose, and went to Amhara, and came to a village, which was called Weshaturs, and dwelt in the upper part of it. Chapter 27. And when he was there, King Yaqub came from Begameder, and encamped in the lower part of the same land, and they stayed within sight of one another. But King Sultan Sagad, when saw the multitude of King Yaqub's soldiers, he resolved to your heart go to Shagla village. And then the king asked his brother, the Ras Yamana Crestos, saying, do not separate yourself from me, and do not leave me, if King Yaqub come to fight with me, to make war looking for a damaged land, and to help you me. But the Ras Yamana Crestos refused him, and did not give him his face. And King Sultan Sagad did not stop asking him, kissing him, fingers and the soles of my feet, and said to him, do not leave me, my brother and my mother's son. But the Ras Yamana Crestos obstinate his heart, and thickened his neck, and said to him, it is not possible for me to leave my region, and leave my father's inheritance, and walk with you by other counties. And after they had spoken these things among themselves, the king and the Ras Yamana Crestos went each one his way, and on the third day after they parted, when Fasiledas was coming from Gojam to Amhara, on the way he met the Ras Yamana Crestos, he fought with El, and pursued and did not escape Ras Yamana Crestos. None of the horses or mules, and he fled with fear and trembling. And on the third day, after Fasiledas vanquished the Ras Yamana Crestos, King Sultan Sagad heard that Fasiledas had come from Gojam to Amhara, and the King Sultan Sagad deliberated to fight with Fasiledas, while he was alone. He prepared his heart, and went with some of his men on horseback and footmen, and waited for him, hiding himself in a low land of Wegda, which was called Manta Dafar. And Fasiledas arrived with great pride and swelling of the heart, saying, who will appear before me, and who will dare with me? And King Sultan Sagad arose from where he had stood, and set up his chieftain after the likeness of the Gala, but the soldiers of Fasiledas and all the Amhara did not know the chief then, and were disorderly as people of fair. And when they came together to fight, one fell pillory over the king's barbot, but it did not reach his body, and God saved him with your help. But of this Fasiledas with all his soldiers did not resist for a moment, but turned his back on the king's soldiers Sultan Sagad, and fled in great fear, like the beast that flee from the face of the lion, and the victory went to King Sultan Sagad, and the victory to Fasiledas. So on the same day of the battle, the soldiers of Gojam who were killed, not they had an account, and also the Siam Amagiorgis was then killed in the same battle, and the Abedahun were captured Abranyos, and the Abedahun Hamalmal, and the Azai Samian, and the Azai Fatlo, and those that were left, when they did not find whither to go, they entered of their own free will, and found much prey, and a Dabana was also taken, and there lacked nothing that was necessary, of weapons of war, and of all corporate needs. And all this victory took place on the 10th of Yakadat, on the feast day of the Apostle Street. Chiago, son of Alpheus, and Fasiledas, after he had escaped, met King Yaqub, and King Yaqub did not receive him, but desired to punish him, and despised him, and there was Katama into two parts, and there was great intrigue and murmuring in the camp, and fear and distrust entered the heart of all soldiers. And after that King Yaqub returned to Begameder, as one fleeing, and along the way many goods were given, and everyone in Katama lost their hope of life, and encamped in the land of Samada. And the King Sultan Sagad passed into a land, which was called Kolo, and there passed the feast of Manfak Assam, and after this he arose, and went to Begameder, and came to a land, which it was called Kararam, which was the Katama of the Ras Welda Crestos, and set fire to all the houses, and Dali took 2 bombards, and after he had done all this, he marched, and encamped in a land, which was called Chachako. And King Yaqub, when he heard as well as King Sultan Sagad, arose in haste, and marched against him with many fighting soldiers, and also Pope Abba Petros was then with him, and having reached the land where King Sultan Sagad was, he encamped in the vicinity of it. But the land, in which King Yaqub encamped, was low, and that of King Sultan Sagad was high and lofty. And after this they began to fight. And the soldiers of King Jacob were weary, and many died, and also the Doj Asmach Kefla Wahid was then with King Jacob, and were with he many fighting soldiers of the people of Tegar, and of these many died, and he also escaped with difficulty and was saved from that day. And so the victory went to the King Sultan Sagad, and the victory of King Jacob, and the Pope Saba Petros was wounded by a shotgun blast the turban from your head, but it did not reach his body. And the day they fought was a Sunday and the Feast of Palms. And they stationed the same day each in their camps, and the day after that, which was a Monday, they passed in the same way, and on Monday afternoon. On Tuesday morning King Sultan Sagad arose, and went to Amhara, for he had not yet arrived, the day of expired of the trade, and there he spent the feast of the Passover. And King Jacob spent the Passover feast in Bagameter. And on the day of the crucifixion he killed some blameless innocents. No reason for the words of slanderous men, who were Delo, son of Azai Babo, and Za Mariam, son of Asmach Harbo, and Za Manphas Kedis, son of Asmach Bar Sagad, and 4 other men. And after he killed these, there was sorrow of heart, and not outward sorrow, throughout your camp and in your katama. And after this, after the Passover feast, with the joy of the weak King Jacob returned to his katama, and entered Koga, which it was a land of discord, which did not mean peace, like someone running away from what is chasing him. All this sign of success had meaning, but its meaning manifests itself at the end of the event, on the 4th of Magabit, on the first Saturday, because inside this success there was a great mystery, because the beginning of the victory was in day of Sunday in the land of Chachako from Bagameter, and its conclusion was on the first Sabbath day in the land of Gojim in a place, which was called Gal. And King Sultan Sagad, after the Passover feast, arose from the land of Davant, and went to Bagameter with many Gala, and devastated everything, and caught both men and beasts, and many of the people of the province were slain. And when he had done all this, he arose, and returned to Amhara, and from Amhara he went to Gojim, and having arrived there, he took greater prey than that the prey of Bagameter, and he left no oxen, horses, mules, or anything that could be found in the province. And having heard this, all that breathes was startled, and the soldiers of King Jacob were troubled, and were filled with great fear, and did not know what to do, and everywhere they were afflicted. So when they went to Amhara, they did not get what they wanted, and they did not find what they wanted, and when they returned to Bagameter, saw the devastation of their province, the slaughter of their people, and their salary at the time of the battle, but they swelled up the neck of their heart, and made their mind obstinate, and in all their works they were like unto Pharaoh king, from Egypt. But King Sultan Sagad, after he had done all this, returned to Amhara, and dwelt in a land, which was called Faris Bar, and wintered there. Ourselves in winter's days the son of Doba Sultan, Welda Crestos, went to make war in the land of Davant, having gathered all the soldiers of Bagameter, saying, as King Sultan Sagad smites the province of Bagameter and Gojim, so will I also smite the land of Davant, saying such advice went to Davant with many Makuanan of Bagameter and great lords of Negarit. And having arrived, they released the Varari, and found nothing, and they turned their faces towards Bagameter. And as they were descending a slope, the people of Davant rose up against them, fought with them, and overcame them, and slew the son of the Doba Sultan, Welda Crestos, and the son of the Azai Makabo, Arsani, and Badle, and the Kerbane, and the Bali Taklo, all these lords of Negarit and many other soldiers of Bagameter they then slew. Chapter 28. For and after the end of the winter was near, the king arose from the same place, in which he wintered, Ambasal, and then went Estros and Sena Crestos, and made friends with King Jacob. And as the king was going along the road, he spent the feast of the cross in a land, which was called Kolo. And after that the king came to the same Amba, and there encamped, he devastated it, and destroyed it with a mighty destruction, and reduced the people that were in it. And then, from this he arose at the 3rd of Heder, and went to the 2 sides of Israel to make war with them, for at the same time they had revolted against themselves. And having arrived there, he opened the Amba, and subdued those of Israel, and he swore an oath to them that they would not rebel again. And after you've done that, went to Hake, which is the monastery of Abba Iyasus Moa, father of many, to expel the Gala. And having arrived thither, it did not please him to expel the Gala, but he returned to Davant, and encamped in a land, which was called Bar Kaga. And, when he was there, Zosiles sent him a message about of the business of friendship, as it would return to him, and I would obey his lordship. And the king, having heard the message of friendship, made him word of reply with assent and oath. And King Jacob also then got out of his katama, and went to Sama with many soldiers of fight and Ak at Jar, and he encamped in a land, which was called Quelqualco, and there he had a cab made, and there he spent the feast of the birth and baptism, devastating the region with the pretext of Gebra and Kadeta. And King Sultan Sagad, after he concluded friendship with Fasiledas, went to Gojam by the way of Amhara, while the King Yaqub stayed at Quelqualco doing the cab. Then King Sultan Sagad said, "But after this it will not be possible for me to make war with Begameter, and if I make prey, when down the slope, King Yaqub will not bring me down." On account of this, and on account of the friendship of Fasiledas, he passed to Gojam, and reached the land of Buddha, and went on to feast of birth and baptism in the land of Agexa, and after that he met Fasiledas on the bank of a river, which was called Sadeh. And King Yaqub also arose from Quelqualco, and went to Guaham by the way of Vito and Darha, and passed the river of Abui, and came to the land of Sharqa. But King Sultan Sagad, before he heard the coming of King Yaqub, came to Yadavray, and when there he was, some of the people of Damat entered to him, and Daj Asmak Asba was also with him then. And after this he returned, and crossed the river of Abia, and came to the land of Kulisa, and encamped there, and remained 8 days. And when he was there, some Gala returned to him, numbering about 30. And King Yaqub, rising from Sharqa he came to Dabra Selalo, and encamped there. Then King Yaqub and King Sultan Sagad saw each other through the smoke of their camps. And after this King Yaqub arose from Selalo, and went by the way of Enzagedam, and having arrived there, he set fire to the houses of the people of the region of Damat, and devastated everything he found, and wanted to pass the river of Abia, but his Kirban, and the Aket Jar, and all the Chavas prevented him, saying, "If we pass the river of Abia, our path will be to the slope, while above us King Sultan Sagad with the soldiers prepared for battle and combat, and if rise up against us, we will have the affront and the reward." And with these words of advice they led him astray. And they led him by another way, a rough and stony slope, and a slope leading to the river of Beer, and they marched him down this low way. And King Sultan Sagad, when he learned of the march of King Yaqub, he went to the Daga of the region, and his path was high and level.